So yeah, hi everybody. I am Simon Bennett from the Environment Agency. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm the project manager for the Alt Crossens Priority Catchment project, but also fill the role of catchment coordinator for the Alt Crossens and the Wire. So technically 50% of my time is focused on water resources, so basically water availability on the Alt Crossens, and the rest of my time is split between the Alt Crossens and the Wire, looking at additional issues. So I'm just going to start off with a little bit of detail about the priority catchment and what it means for how we work on the Alt Crossens. Do you want mind going to the next slide, Rebecca? Thanks. So the sorry, technical issues here. So basically, yeah, the Alt Crossens is one of 10 designated priority catchments across the country. So in early 2018, the original 4 priority catchments were designated. That was the Idle and Torn, South 40 Foot, Cam and Ely and East Suffolk. And then late last year, the Alt Crossens joined those along with the Till and Tweed, the Wye, the Brew, the Otter, and the Arun and the Western Streams. So basically these are chosen for a variety of reasons, but all driven by water availability or lack of. Some for public water supply reasons, some such as the Alt Crossens for agricultural crop irrigation supplies. And essentially, yeah, there's a really good team of priority catchment leads and national leads. So loads of opportunities to share best practice with catchments that have already had a head start and those that are running alongside. Could we have the next slide, Rebecca? So yeah, the steer from national, which is where the funding comes for this project, is very much around delivering solutions to water availability pressures by using what's called the catchment-based approach. And this has been used successfully over recent years to address primarily water quality issues, but it's a tried and tested model. So we're encouraged to use it for this project as well. So essentially what we're doing is focusing where the pressure is greatest, hence the designation of priority catchments. And these priority catchments have been selected by local areas who essentially put a case forward for that designation. There's a huge emphasis with this project on collaboration, which is why we're here today, which is why the Water Friendly Farming Group exists. And it's the key thing is that what we're acknowledging is that the solutions shouldn't be the EA telling anybody that we've got all the answers. It should be about taking a step back, listening and thinking about possible solutions, particularly innovative solutions. And where there are existing groups such as catchment partnerships, which are headed up by Mersey Rivers Trust, there's a drive to utilise them as opposed to starting anything from scratch. And ultimately, the aim at the end of 2021 is for the catchment solutions to be detailed within the new abstraction licensing strategies, and hopefully that will bring with it some alterations to water availability as a result of that. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So as mentioned, we want to have useful conversation to develop solutions. So there's a steer to develop and deliver trials, and if trials require variations to permits, there are mechanisms in place to facilitate this and agreements with our national legal teams. So there's a real emphasis on multiple benefits. So although the project is driven and funded by Water Resources, we recognise that in order to draw support and obviously funding, we need to be thinking about solutions or steps towards solutions that include benefits to biodiversity, water quality, flood risk management, etc., etc. So under the catchment-based approach, it's recognised that these solutions need to be tailored to a particular catchment. So there isn't some magic solution that we can just roll out across the country to solve any of the issues. A real emphasis on taking stock and working out what's necessary for the Alt Crossens as a tailored solution to improve water availability for all. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So essentially, my role is to pull all of this together. So all of what I've covered already and anything else that comes up in the near future, essentially to identify opportunities and find ways to deliver those opportunities. So this has already begun. So I've been working with the Catchment Partnership, Mersey Rivers Trust, to basically, I suppose the first step was to convince them to be a major player in this engagement. And they agreed, which is why we're here today. And the first step towards that is this creation of the subgroup of the Catchment Partnership, the Water Friendly Farming Group, which again has brought this together today. And the reason the catchment partnership is utilised is this allows us to kind of soften our engagement and hopefully have some useful discussion and useful decision making taking place external from the EA as a regulator. And there's obviously loads of opportunity to share that best practice and share lessons learned around the country and to learn from other areas of the country. And one of the other key things with this project is that the water company support is key. So in our case, United Utilities. So United Utilities are always looking for projects with multiple benefits, just like we are. And they're key players in the group, a strategic group called Water Resources West, which includes the Severn Trent Water, South Staffs, Welsh Water. And that's basically looking at the strategy around wider water availability. So large scale transfer of supplies, trading of supplies, some really big potentials, schemes which we're exploring with them as well. So things like if money was no object, could a large scheme working in collaboration with the water utility companies, could a large scheme supply the Alt Crossens with water at times of drought? Next slide, please, Rebecca. So why the Alt Crossens? So as I said, water availability issues generally limited to summer months. We obviously know there are land drainage issues, which does make water resources engagement difficult, and other issues, including soil loss, which leads to ever lowering land levels, irrigation water loss, lack of storage, hydrological understanding, water quality, illegal abstractions, illegal impoundments, and the list could go on. And so we need to take stock of where we are on the Alt Crossens with the various different issues and how they sort of intertwine. We've got a catchment partnership in existence already with a well-developed relationship, so it makes sense to use that, which is why we are doing that. And as I said earlier, the catchment-based approach subgroup that's been pulled together, the water-friendly farming group, already includes the EA, CSF, NFU, United Utilities, farmers, and academia, and that water-friendly farming group, all being well, will continue to grow and be more representative as we move on. So next slide, please, Rebecca. Just to touch on water quality, as Caroline mentioned earlier, both the Alt and the Crossens systems, both classed as moderate under the Water Framework Directive, the latest of which is very up to date based on last year's results. The full detail of that designation, the data rather, can be viewed for anybody that wishes to via the Catchment Data Explorer, which is available online. If you literally Google Catchment Data Explorer, it allows you to delve into the data for any catchment in England. So essentially, that classification hasn't changed on the Alt Crossens since 2016, which in some ways you could see as a positive. So some catchments have deteriorated. The Alt Crossens hasn't; it stayed as is. But the question is, can we get the catchment to good by 2027, which is what we are committed to aim for. Worth noting as well that our funding has reduced over that period from 2016 to 19. So the challenge is even greater. You can see on the graph there that the reduction in funding obviously has resulted in less water samples and less resource in general. But the issues for the Alt Crossens, one of the main issues being that the watercourses are heavily modified. So most are unnatural to begin with, man-made systems. So always going to be a difficult task. Phosphate from private sewage discharges and misconnections, as mentioned. Sewage discharges, so public treated sewage discharges. Also, historic landfill on the Alt Crossens. There's a number of historic landfills that were the old dilute and disperse unlined landfills, which we know were having impacts on various areas of the Alt Crossens. And then also soil loss and fertilizer loss being big issues. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So the question is how we capture all of this detail that I've made reference to. So we already know there's a lot going on the Alt Crossens. There's a huge amount of knowledge, and we can all benefit from sharing this between functions within the Environment Agency and with external partners. So the question is how we capture that, how we capture what's going on, how do we capture all that knowledge, and how do we share it, how do we identify the gaps in our knowledge, and all of these questions really. What we're doing today is the first step at plugging some of those gaps. But the way, or one of the things that we're looking at as a way of pulling all that together and sharing it in a usable format is what we're calling the Alt Crossens knowledge exchange system. If we go on to the next slide, Rebecca. So basically, this is a GIS-based system using a program called Enterprise. It allows a huge amount of detail to be held within the system, but remains user-friendly. And essentially, it operates like a website with sort of intuitive map functions. And it can be shared via a simple web link with maps updated with ease and automatically. So primarily, this will be used internally to bring our EA functions together and to ensure a joined up approach, but there's possibility of an external version of this as well. So essentially it's a presentation tool, a way of us pulling huge amounts of information and knowledge together and learning together and presenting it in a usable format. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So as an example, the tabs along the top of the knowledge exchange system allow the user to navigate through the history of the catchment. So even a new member of staff can gain a good understanding of issues and opportunities in a very short amount of time. Next slide, please, Rebecca. And it'll also give detail of which organisations, external organisations, are working together to ensure that we're joined up externally as well. So this is the starting point really of this system. There's a lot more on this to come, and at future workshops and conferences we'll present this as it builds. So very much the start of a very focused approach on the Alt Crossens.